Darling Love, and you're listening to Rodney on the Rock, and he's a rebel.
Good evening, it's 8 o'clock, and I'm for Rodney on the Rock, from now until midnight.
Okay, that was MFQ starting off with Rodney on the Rock's traditional theme, This Could Be the Night, a rare Spectre track. And that goes out to the film crew from London who are in LA right now. They're doing a film on Phil Spector, and they're trying to track Phil down. I hope they find him. It won't be easy, but I'll keep you informed on their progress. Anyway, this goes out for them.
Could have been a ballad, and it would have sounded like, I met her on a Monday, and my heart stood still. The do run, 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 the do run, run. And somebody told me her name was Jill. The do run, 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 the do run, run. Oh. It probably means the same thing as doo-wop-diddy and all those other silly things. Actually, there was a big discussion about whether it should be met her on a Monday and my heart stood still, or met him on a Sunday and my heart stood still. Sunday seems like the day to meet someone and fall in love. But Monday sounds better. Met him on a Monday instead of met him on a Sunday, like where that S come from. So met him on a Monday is where it is, and everyone thinks it's Sunday. But it's Monday. It's the only good thing that's ever happened on a Monday. Now, I think up until the mid-50s, kids seemed to have to accept the music that the adults were presented with, and you had to relate to that and accept it and sing those songs, as opposed to songs that were really aimed at the youth market. And I never really realized how much those songs that we were doing in those days really did touch and were appreciated by the youth market until that youth grew up and I started to date them. Now I'm meeting the people who bought the records and they say, you wrote the Do-Run Run, and you wrote Chapel of Love, and you wrote Be My Baby. And they really, I really am meeting the people that were touched by the songs, and they were touched in the way that I wanted them to be, and that everyone wanted them to be.
And you're listening to Rodney on the Rock, and this is the Phil Spector Show. So you might say, who's Phil Spector? Well, he's a little guy he's like a teenage millionaire back in the 50s that produced everybody. You name the band, he produced. He's produced the Stones, he's produced the Beatles, of course all the early stuff with the girl groups like the Ronettes, Crystals, and Darlene Love, and all that in the 60s. You probably see him in movies even. He was in the opening scene of Easy Rider when he was a cocaine dealer in Easy Rider, and he's been on I Dream of Jeannie, and he's done everything. Then you heard his group, the Teddy Bears, doing To Know Him Is to Love Him. He formed that group in 1958. Now we're going into the 60s. Here's a big hit that Phil had with Benny King. If Phil ever served an apprenticeship with anyone, it was with Lieber and Stoller, and it was with Jerry Lieber that he wrote Spanish Harlem when Phil was in his teens.
Lester Sill, who was responsible, an old and dear friend of ours, who was responsible for getting us into the music industry, took us around, introduced us to all of the independent record company owners, like the people who owned Aladdin Records and Modern Records and Specialty Records. These were all the little record companies that were cooking around the early 50s. Phil Spector was discovered 10 years later by Lester Sill. And Lester gave us a call. We were in New York at the time. And said he had a very talented young man who was rather frustrated with the music scene on the West Coast and really wanted to get with Lieber and Stoller and see what was happening. He wanted to apprentice himself to Lieber and Stoller. And would we consider taking him over?
He seemed a very bright, very sharp young man, very witty, sarcastic. I sensed a rather angry young man, and he dressed like a businessman. He wore a tie, a suit and a tie, and looked like he was a young man on the make.
What finally happened was we were called to do Ray Peterson for Big Top Records, and we were really absolutely under with commitments. We were behind, and I thought that would be a great opportunity for Phil to get his feet wet in producing a record on his own. So we convinced the powers that be, the powers that were at Big Top to try Phil Spector out. And he had a big hit right out of the first session, was Corrine Corina. And that was his first independent production under the aegis of Lieber and Stoller as an apprentice. After that, Atlantic became very much interested in Phil Spector. The truth is that after many, many sessions and spending quite a bit of money, he didn't pull any hits out of his hat at Atlantic, and they became very disenchanted. And Phil went on. I'm not sure what the next move was, but
well, I think the next important move was that he started a record company with Lester Sill called Phil Less Records. As soon as the label became successful, which it did, and became extremely successful. I mean, that was the main string of Phil's hits. He attempted to take over the entire label by himself and get rid of Lester Sill, which he was ultimately successful in doing.
well, if there's such a thing as a bad guy, it's Phil Spector. He's not honorable, and he's not honest. He is talented. But I think the self-promotion he did on himself was way above and beyond what his talents merited. I think he made some good records. But I know of a lot of people who've made better records and more of them, and no one even knows who they are. Maxwell Davis, I don't know if you've ever heard that name, but Maxwell Davis made records. He was the quiet producer, arranger for Eddie, the Messner brothers at Aladdin, the Harry brothers, at Modern, Art Roop, at Specialty. I mean, Max Roach must have made 100 hits.
Maxwell Davis.
I'm sorry, Maxwell Davis must have made 100 hits, not 12 or 17. And nobody knows who Maxwell Davis is today.
I think one of the things that Phil Spector added to record production was PR.
This spacious mansion is built on one man's capacity for long-range survival in the unpredictable record business. 25 years old, he owns record and publishing companies valued in the millions. He began to compose, arrange, and sing at the age of 16. Dozens of hit records since then indicate that Spector's beat is closely tuned to teen desire.
I myself have a tremendous yearning to be respected, a yearning to be accepted. I see this in the teenagers, yearning to do things, to be someone, to be important, and to be recognized. Difficult to say exactly why anyone would respond to this music, but basically, it is an emotional music for an emotional generation.
A great sense of PR. By the way, that was, I think there was a coincidence of interest building about this industry, this rock and roll industry. Because when we were in it, writing rhythm and blues, race records, whatever you want to call it, it was a cottage industry. These labels were owned by small families. It grew into this billion-dollar industry. And when it did, and as it did, people became interested in in trivia. I mean, you get magazines based on trivia. So there was this great eruption of media, and Phil rode the crest because Phil was very smart about public relations. He knew how to sell a product, and his product was Phil Spector.
Go, Rita, go, Rita. Go, Rita, go, Rita. I love you so. Go, Rita, go, Rita. Go, Rita, go, Rita.
When Phil Spector decided to release his records on his own label, the label was Philly's Records. The LES was Lester Sill.
His talent number one, best of any producer I've ever met. More imagination. He's a great songwriter. He's a great arranger. Great engineer, great producer. He knows exactly what he wants, and he doesn't stop until he gets it. Never compromises, never. Never did. He totally dominated the artist, and with a very, very strong attitude. It had to be his way or there was no way. But like I say, this is what it may have to take. I don't know how close, genius and eccentric go together. And I feel that Philip was, and I can't say whether he still is, because the business has changed so drastically, but Philip was a music genius in the record business. His songs and his productions and his arrangements and so forth were so far superior to most of the junk that was coming out then. And the fact that he has created this legend about himself is really there's a foundation to it all.
See the way he walks down the street. Watch the way he shuffles his feet. I always get a high when he goes walking by. He's my guy. When he holds my hand, I'm so proud. 'Cause he's not just one
And that was He's a Rebel. And you're listening to Rodney and Phil Spector. Think of a real pioneer of the rock and roll business, and you'll think of the president of Atlantic Records. And I wonder what he has to say about Phil.
There aren't that many producers today who are producers in the sense that Phil was a producer. Phil was really a man who made the record. The artist was secondary. He needed an artist who could carry on and come out and sing the song. But the artist could be interchangeable. What was important was his concept, the song, and his concept of the production. And for that reason, you know, you were asking me before which my favorites are. I think Be My Baby, you know, which I think was by the Ronettes. But, you know, when you think back, you say, was it by the Ronettes or was it by the Crystals? Or you even think, my God, some of the Paris Sisters and so forth. You know, all these groups were more or less, you know, interchangeable because it wasn't really, even though they're all great artists, the records were successful because of Phil's production. And there aren't that kind of producer today, because most of our producers today get the best out of the artist. It's the artist who is the star, and the producer who is sort of, you know, helps him along, but helps him bring the best out in himself. There are very few producers today who go out and build a hit. I guess that the last time there were some of the disco producers were doing that. But with the demise of that, I don't know anyone not out there today who is a producer in the sense that Phil Spector was a producer. Two people who really worked closely with Phil when he was making his historic records at different times were Sonny Bono and Nino Tempo, who became sort of disciples of his. And I would suggest that you talk to Nino Tempo, who's a great friend of Sonny's and who's producing records today and has produced some great records on his own.
Phil Spector is a very unusual human being. Certainly not your everyday run-of-the-mill issue record producer. He extremely brilliant, extremely sensitive, the best ears in a recording studio that I've ever come across. He would hear things that only a dog could hear. He'd point something out many times. He'd have to actually point it out for me to hear it. Once I focused on it, then I got it. But he had incredible ears. He was very egotistical, and I don't say that in a negative manner, because I don't believe that he could have made the kind of records he made if he didn't have quite an ego. I think they go hand in hand. He was a very tough guy. Phil was in business, really tough. I've heard him on the phone talking some deals. Goes right for the jugular. But you've got to remember, Phil was a poor kid. Phil lost his father very young. When Phil was a kid, he had a weight problem in high school, I believe. He was overweight, and I think a lot of the fellows would make fun of him. And so that probably created the drive to get back. Phil always used to say to me, "Gene, you know, I wish I had bigger muscles like you do." So there were a lot of things in Phil that created the motivation to show the people back at school that the kid who was a little overweight, look at the weight he lost, and look at all the money he made, look at the records he was producing, and look at the people he was rubbing elbows with. So I think all of that became part of the drive to be such a good businessman and to make all this money. One particular incident that stands out in my mind is when Phil came out to California to record Be My Baby. One interesting thing happened. I was out in the room where the musicians were playing, and there was a lot of mistakes out there. There was a lot of imperfection out there. And I thought, oh boy, they sure haven't got this time. You've got a room full of 36 guys, and you know, half of them making mistakes. And I thought, how's he ever going to make this into a smash? But then I walked back into the booth and Phil said, wait until you hear what I got. And I heard it coming back, and it was a miracle. It was glorious. And I said, but I just heard a bunch of mistakes. He says, never mind what's really out there. Listen to what I got in here. And that's where the magic came. Between the wires and the booth, Phil got magic. He caught lightning in a bottle, time and time again. And this is the record that I heard.
Darling, this is Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and whenever I'm in Los Angeles, which is all the time, I listen to Rodney on the Rock, KROQ, FM, Pasadena.
Still no word from Phil yet. Well, I guess it'll take time. But they're off to Studio A at Gold Star here in Hollywood. Stan Ross, Larry Levine will be there to tell them all about the Wall of Sound.
The Wall of Sound was a descriptive name given by someone else other than Phil. I mean, he didn't coin the phrase Wall of Sound. That Wall of Sound actually came through because at that point in time, and we're talking about 1961 now,